We arrived for Christmas to visit our son. His wife opened the door, smiled, and said, "This year we will be alone." We got into the car and hooted, but soon Ashley opened the door like I was just someone who had shown up without an invitation. Her smile was too fast, too tight. I noticed her eyes didn't crinkle at the corners like they usually did when she laughed. It wasn't a warm smile. It was a polite one, the kind you give when you want someone to leave. Then she said it as if she were informing a neighbor about the recycling schedule. "We've decided to celebrate with just the kids. Just us." Her tone wasn't mean. It was worse. It was final. No invitation to reschedule. No mention of a quick visit. Not even a suggestion we exchange gifts later. Just a clean cut. I stared at her for a moment, trying to understand what was happening. My mind was still trying to catch up. I looked down at the cookies in my hands. Sugar and cinnamon. Toby's favorite. I make them every year. She didn't even glance at them. "You understand, right?" she added, softer now, but not kinder. "It's just easier this way." That word again. Easier. Ashley had said the same thing last year when she asked us not to come to Emma's ballet recital. "It's such a short show, and the parking is a nightmare. It's just easier if we film it for you." It wasn't about parking. It was about control. I shifted the tin in my hands. My arms felt stiff. Inside, I could see stockings on the fireplace. 5 of them. 1 for the dog. None for us. There was new garland on the stair rail, silver and gold. I hadn't seen it before. I realized I hadn't been in the house for over a month. Then Adam appeared. My son. My only child. He came down the hallway slowly, hands in his pockets. No smile, no words, no hesitation. He just stood there. I waited for him to say something, anything. But he didn't. He looked right at me and didn't speak. He didn't say, "Mom, I'm sorry." He didn't say, "We'll miss you." He didn't say, "I know this is hard." He just nodded. A nod, like a transaction had been completed. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I smiled. I smiled the way women are trained to smile when they're being dismissed, to make the other person comfortable, to make rejection easier. "Of course," I said. "We won't get in the way." Ashley reached for the cookie tin. "Oh, you brought these. That's sweet." Sweet, like I was an old neighbor who made something useless. She didn't even open the lid. Then she stepped back and closed the door, just halfway. Not a real goodbye, just enough to end the conversation. I turned and walked to the car. Henry was there, waiting, as always. He saw the look on my face and didn't ask. "They said it's just the kids this year," I said as I shut the door. He didn't say anything. He just took my hand, held it gently, like always. Like he knew better than to speak. The drive home was quiet. Lights blinked from every roof. Trees glowed from behind windows. Families were inside, laughing, cooking, making memories. Inside our house, the silence was unbearable. I turned on the tree lights out of habit. The blinking looked cheerful, too cheerful. I stood in the doorway and stared at the ornaments. Emma's first Christmas photo, Toby's handprint reindeer, the felt stocking Adam made when he was 7. All of it still hung proudly, but none of it mattered now. I walked into the kitchen. My hands still smelled like vanilla from baking. I sat down and stared at the counter. I'd spent the last 3 weeks preparing gifts. Toby's train set, Emma's paints, matching pajamas. I found the perfect wrapping paper. Everything labeled, everything arranged, all of it useless. I kept thinking about her words. "It's just easier this way." That wasn't the first time she'd said something like that. Last Thanksgiving, she told me not to bring my stuffing. "We're doing a new recipe this year, fewer side dishes. It just keeps things simpler." On Toby's birthday, I showed up with balloons. She said, "Oh, we didn't expect you. We told everyone to come tomorrow instead." When I reminded her, she said Saturday, not Sunday. She replied, "I must have been confused. These things happen." But they always happen to me. Adam never corrected her, Never even looked surprised, just nodded, always nodded. I used to think he didn't notice, that he was distracted, working too hard, stressed. But now I understood. He was choosing. He chose her convenience over our connection. I thought about everything I'd done for them, quietly, without being asked. The deposits, the freezer, the wedding gifts I paid for, the dinners I cooked, the time I babysat their sick dog for 3 days while they went skiing. Every time I gave something, I thought I was proving my love. But to them, it was just expected. Normal. Background. We were just part of the house, like wallpaper. Henry sat across from me, quiet. His eyes scanned my face. "We could still go to the lake," he said after a long time. "Just us." I shook my head. "I don't want to escape it." I walked into the living room. The tree blinked again. The lights looked fake. I turned them off. The house went still. The wrapped gifts in the corner looked sad now, like reminders of a play I was no longer cast in. I sat in the dark. The clock ticked, and then something shifted. Not rage, not sorrow, not panic. Something else. A quiet, firm decision. They didn't want us there. We'd give them space, but not the way they expected. This time, they would feel what it was like when the giving stopped. And maybe, just maybe, they'd remember what we actually were to them, before we were reduced to just easier, before we became nothing more than a complication. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace but pressure, like the air just before a storm. I stood in the kitchen and watched the kettle begin to steam, the water inside heating slowly, purposefully. My reflection in the microwave door looked older than usual, more tired, more angry. I didn't speak right away. Neither did Henry. He knew better. He knows when my silence isn't sadness. This time, it was calculation. A long, cold clarity began forming in my mind, not out of hatred, but out of something older. Disappointment. Exhaustion. "Do you remember," I asked finally, "how much we spent on last year's Christmas?" Henry didn't hesitate. "Over 5,000 between the gifts, food, and that cabin rental." I nodded. "And the year before that?" "Around the same. Maybe more. We even covered the car rental for her parents." "Right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, because Ashley said it would be easier that way. We stood there, side by side in the kitchen, two people who had done everything right, raised a child, worked long hours, saved, helped, and now we were alone, as if none of it ever happened. I thought back to the time Adam asked us to co-sign on their first mortgage. He was so anxious, his hands shaking. I remember holding his hand across our kitchen table, telling him, "You're not alone in this. We're family." Henry stepped away for a moment and came back with a photo album. He opened it without a word and flipped to a picture of Adam as a teenager, standing next to the old car we gave him. That rusted thing cost us more than we could afford at the time. "Remember this?" he asked. He cried when we handed him the keys, said he wouldn't let us down. I smiled, but it was hollow. He didn't let us down all at once. It was in little steps. Henry nodded. He just stopped calling, little by little. I looked down. I used to call Ashley every Friday to check in. At first she picked up. Then it became voicemails, then just silence. "She used to ask for recipes," Henry said, a small frown forming. "Now she just buys takeout and says, 'We don't need all that fuss.'" "She told me once," I said, "that our traditions made things harder, that her family likes to keep holidays simple. But simple just meant without us." Henry leaned against the counter. "They always had an excuse. Not enough space. The kids had activities. The weather was bad. We live 15 minutes away. And remember when Emma had her school play? We weren't told. We saw pictures online. I messaged Adam and he said, 'Oh, we didn't want to bother you with the small stuff.'" Henry shook his head slowly. "I built that stage, donated the wood, volunteered 2 weekends, but I wasn't invited." I blinked fast. I remember when Toby had a fever and Ashley called me at midnight. I sat with him for 5 hours so they could sleep. The next day, she told her mother how exhausting it was for them to stay up all night. She didn't even mention I was there. Henry looked at me and his eyes were glassy. I fixed their fence in the snow last winter. Caught a cold doing it. Remember? I nodded. You didn't complain once. No, he said, because I thought I was helping family. But I think now we were just filling in the gaps they didn't want to handle. We both sat down at the table. The silence now felt heavier. I reached for a notebook and started writing. Not plans, just memories. I made 2 columns, one for all the things we did, one for what we got back. The imbalance was blinding. Birthdays we hosted, emergencies we handled, holidays we paid for, groceries, repairs, babysitting, support, time, love. What did we receive? Thanks that faded over time. Excuses, distance, exclusion, and always, always, that polite smile from Ashley that said, "You're not needed." Henry got up and pulled something from the back of the drawer, a thank you card from their wedding. The last thing he said that felt genuine. It was dated 2009. Since then, he said, placing it on the table, we became invisible. I stared at the card, then at him. Maybe it's time we stop offering ourselves where we're not welcome. He nodded. The kettle clicked off. We didn't pour the tea, just sat there, remembering everything we gave, and slowly realizing just how little of us was ever truly seen. By the next morning, I didn't feel angry anymore. Not the kind of anger that comes in heat and shouting. This was the kind that settles deep. It stiffens your spine and sharpens your thoughts. A calm, focused resolve. I'd spent too many years hoping they'd remember. Now they'd be reminded. Henry was already at the kitchen table when I came down. He'd made coffee, but it sat untouched in front of him. I checked the account, he said quietly. The mortgage payment hasn't gone out yet. I sat beside him. Good. We didn't look at each other. We didn't need to. I logged into the bank. The number stared back at me. $1,400 scheduled. Same as always. Automatic, reliable. Just like us. It was a mortgage payment on a seaside bungalow that we are helping them with. I hovered over the cancel button. In that moment, I thought of Ashley's voice again, clear as day. It's just easier this way. I clicked it. Canceled. Next, I opened a folder from the drawer. Property records. The title of the house was still in our name. Always had been. We'd let them live there for free under the agreement that when they could afford it, they'd buy it from us. They never tried. I picked up the phone and called the real estate agent. Her voice was cheerful. I gave her the address, and for a moment I hesitated. Then I said, "We're ready to list." Immediately. Henry looked up from his cup. I met his eyes. "We're not being cruel," I said. "We're being clear." He nodded. "It's time." There was a pause then, one that came with weight. "Miriam," Henry said, "do you remember that night he was 16? When he crashed the car?" I did. Too well. He called crying. We paid the tow truck, the repairs, and told him it was okay. He promised to learn from it. Henry nodded slowly. And when he moved back in after college with no job, we cooked every meal, paid for his phone, his insurance, all of it. I felt a familiar ache settle in my chest. And when he got married and Ashley's parents said they couldn't help financially, we covered the venue deposit, and all she said was, "We assumed you would." That line still echoed in my mind. Assumed. Then came the twist, an image that hit me harder than the house or the money. Last spring, we were at Emma's birthday. I had arrived early with a cake I'd made from scratch. Chocolate ganache, her favorite. Ashley took it, smiled, and said, "Oh, Emma already has 2 cakes. You can leave this in the garage, just in case." She didn't serve it. Not a single slice. I stayed the whole party and watched my cake sit forgotten next to the folding chairs. And Emma? She never even knew I made it. That was the moment I should have spoken up, but I didn't. I could have yelled. I could have demanded to be treated better, but I chose silence for Adam. I thought I was protecting him, preserving some idea of family, but silence doesn't protect. It erases. Henry reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not wrong," he said. "We've been too quiet for too long." I nodded. "That's over now." We packed up some things and checked into a small inn by the lake. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. No demands, no expectations. Later that day, I took a photo of us at a little restaurant nearby, candlelight. Nothing extravagant, just the two of us smiling across a modest table. We looked content, because we were. I sent it to the family group chat with a message. "Thank you for giving us the time to enjoy a real Christmas." Seen. But no replies. I turned off the phone. 2 mornings later, I turned it back on. 29 missed calls. 17 from Adam. 8 from Ashley. 4 from Ashley's mother. Voicemails started playing one after another. "Mom? What's going on? The bank said the mortgage didn't clear. Did you forget? Are you seriously selling the house? There's a sign in the yard. I thought that was a mistake. Please call me. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." Ashley's voice cracked in one. "How could you do this? We're family. You can't just—" I muted it. Henry walked into the room, took one look at my face, and smiled slightly. They remembered we exist. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not because they wanted to see me, but because they had no choice. Later that night, I listened to Adam's final message. "Mom, I know we hurt you. We didn't mean to. Can we talk, just us?" I didn't answer. Not yet. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was reality. They made their choices. Now we were making ours, and from here on out, every decision would begin with one simple question. Do they deserve it? The phone didn't ring the next morning. Maybe they were too stunned. Maybe they were plotting their next move. Either way, the silence was different now. Not empty, but meaningful. The kind that fills a room like armor. I didn't feel shaken anymore. Henry made breakfast. I watched him slice apples for the oatmeal and thought about how rare that kind of peace had become. For years, I'd been too distracted by the background noise of other people's needs to notice the quiet spaces that belonged to me. We didn't talk much over breakfast. We didn't need to. Our actions had already spoken, louder than any words we could have used. After the dishes were done, I went to the closet in the guest room where we'd stored the old paper files, the ones Ashley once laughed at. "Why do you keep all this stuff in paper?" she asked once. "Everything's online now." I had smiled then. I don't smile about it now. I was keeping records because I knew, somewhere deep inside, that someday I'd need proof. Not to show them, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining it. Power of attorney documents, letters from banks, copies of tax returns, the binder where we kept every receipt from house repairs, repairs we paid for, not them, fences, plumbing, a new water heater, every dollar accounted for, every sacrifice noted. I laid them out on the table. Henry joined me with a cup of tea. "You're building a case," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm building a boundary." We spent the day reviewing everything. We documented what we had done, what we had given, and where the paper trail ended. Not because we wanted compensation. That ship had sailed, but because we needed to remember. Every time they minimized us, every time Ashley said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered," when they didn't. Every time Adam avoided our calls after we had transferred money. Every time Emma or Toby got birthday cards from us with checks and never even said thank you. They would say we were being dramatic. They would say we were overreacting. But I had the facts, and facts don't lie. Later in the afternoon, Henry drove into town to meet with the lawyer. We hadn't updated our will in 8 years. Back then, everything was set to go to Adam automatically. No questions asked. Now, there were questions. He came back with a calm look on his face. "It's done," he said. No dramatic gestures, no shouting, just that. While he was gone, I walked through the small inn garden and thought about Ashley's words on the phone. "How could you do this?" she'd asked. As if she couldn't imagine we had limits, as if generosity was a contract that meant we'd never stop giving. But we had stopped. And now that we had, the power shift was unmistakable. That's when the storm really hit. By evening, the messages changed tone. Ashley sent a string of angry texts. "This is manipulative. You're just trying to punish us. You can't do this to your grandchildren." Adam left a voicemail. He wasn't calm anymore. "Mom, this isn't okay. You're being unreasonable. We depended on that support. You said you wanted to help." Another message. "You're destroying everything over one holiday." Ashley's mother chimed in too. "This will tear your family apart. Is that really what you want?" Then came the voice notes. Ashley's tone no longer held back. "So now you want to act like victims after everything we've done. We gave you grandkids, didn't we?" And Adam, his voice cracked in fury. "You're embarrassing us. Do you think we can just move? You're making us look like fools." The barrage was endless. Sarcastic messages, accusatory emails, even a long, passive-aggressive Facebook post from Ashley's cousin about elders abandoning family values. I stared at the phone. The flood of blame, guilt, and panic. Not a single word of apology. They were furious. Not because we'd done something wrong, but because we'd stopped doing what they'd come to expect. They weren't sad. They were scared. And that told me everything I needed to know. I forwarded one email to our accountant, the one revoking Adam's access to our joint account. No explanations, just confirmation. Henry sat beside me, silent, sipping his tea. At dinner, I asked, "Do you think they even understand why we're doing this?" He shook his head. "They only feel the consequences, not the reasons." That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Ashley's voice again, sharp and cold. "If you go through with this sale, we'll have to talk about legal steps. You can't just kick us out. We've lived there for years." She still didn't understand. It wasn't theirs. It never had been. They weren't being kicked out. They were being asked to stand on their own. And then she said something I'll never forget. "You're just bitter because you're alone." That sentence burned. She had taken everything we gave, and when we finally said no, she threw that at me. But instead of crying, I laughed. Quietly and just once. Because it wasn't true anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I had Henry. I had peace. And I had my voice back. We spent the next day finalizing documents, closing accounts, rewriting the will. Not out of spite, out of clarity. And still, they kept calling. Still, they kept trying. But they weren't asking us to come back. They were begging us to keep giving. And that was never love. What they called love was dependency and control. We were done. But the most unexpected thing happened a week later. A week later, I got a card in the mail. Not from Adam, not from Ashley. It was from Emma, a hand-drawn snowman on the front. Inside, a sentence written in the shaky, careful script of a child learning cursive. "Thank you for the Christmas sweater, Mimi. I missed you." That one line hit harder than any insult. It wasn't her fault. She didn't know. And yet, even in that moment of sweetness, it stung. Because it reminded me what I was choosing. Not walking away from family, but walking towards self-respect. That night, Henry and I sat in front of the fireplace. We hadn't turned the television on in days. It was just us, talking, remembering. We hadn't felt this present in years. Then my phone vibrated. One more message from Adam. "Mom, please, let's not do this. We'll come visit this weekend. We'll explain everything." There was no apology, no understanding, just another attempt to negotiate. I didn't reply. I opened a new message window instead. Adam, we love you. That hasn't changed. But love without respect is not enough. We won't be attending future family events until we're truly welcome. Not needed, not tolerated, welcome. I read it to Henry. He nodded. That's fair, he said. And I hit send. The fallout was immediate. Ashley sent a furious response. You're punishing everyone over your pride? Adam followed with, we'll figure something out. Just give us more time. They still didn't get it. They still thought this was about time. It was about value. I deleted both messages. We spent the weekend visiting a local museum, strolling through the garden conservatory, and eating at a small Italian place that served the best lasagna I'd had in decades. For the first time in years, our days didn't revolve around being needed. They revolved around being alive. On Sunday morning, we went to a local bookstore. While I browsed, Henry found a leather-bound journal. You should write it down, he said. All of it. So I did. I wrote down the birthdays missed, the favors never acknowledged, the calls ignored. I wrote about the joy of giving and how it soured when it became expected. I wrote about the first time Ashley rolled her eyes when I offered to help, and the last time Adam called me just to say hello. And I wrote about this Christmas, the one that changed everything. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun go down, Henry leaned over and said, Do you regret it? I thought for a long time. No, I said, not even a little. Because in protecting our peace, we finally found it. They thought they could rewrite the rules. That kindness was something owed, that our presence could be turned off like a light switch, only flip back on when convenient. But love is not a faucet. It doesn't flow on demand. It must be returned. And we were done waiting. Now, the house is quiet. The phone doesn't buzz as much, and we're okay with that. We've reclaimed something we didn't even know we'd lost, ourselves. And if you've ever felt like you don't belong, you're not alone.